Hello, you are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Real Impartation Moment on Tuesday Night Anatomy with Daniel Okwan. Today's section, we continue with gametogenesis. Yes, already last week I explained to you how we get the primordial germ cells from some cells of the epiblast. Yes, we went through it. And then, yes, we also looked at spermatogenesis. Now, today, it is a pretty short topic which I want to deal with. And then we will continue the other important bit of it, something we call folliculogenesis, in our next meeting next week. So today, we want to look at oogenesis. But for you to really understand the concept, everything, the dichotomy, yes, between oogenesis and spermatogenesis, then my friends, yes, it will be very important that you watch the previous last week video that we did on, of course, spermatogenesis. Yes, that's very important for you to do that. So kindly go and get that video link and watch it if not done so already. Because the reason is that unlike what we found for spermatogenesis, which began only and only after extrauterine life period. Yes. And whenever I talk about extrauterine life period, the important thing I want to put across here is that it is mainly the meiosis. Yes. So meiosis, which important, we know that it helps in producing haploid functional gametes from diploid cells. Yes, it's going to take place in males after birth. My friends, that is not the case for the female. Because for the female, the stem cells, which we call them oogonia, yes, initially, around the 8th week of intrauterine life, in the absence of something we call the SRY gene, yes, we mentioned that last week, then we know that, yes, this time, the genital ridge is going to give us the ovary, and for that reason, all those primordial germ cells, which, yes, they have become what we call the gametogonium, will have to differentiate to become something we call oogonium. Then, of course, it will undergo some kind of rapid, mitotic division. Some mitosis will take place. And initially, which may be around 600,000, around the 7th week of intrauterine life. Yes, by the 5th, month, what happens is that we may have, about 7 million of these, oogonia. But the important thing that I want you to know is that around the 5th month of intrauterine life, that is where the meiosis, in actually female, producing the functional gamete will begin. Yes. So what is going to happen is that around the 5th month of intrauterine life, in fetal period, that is when meiosis in females, begins. So that all happens is that these, oogonia will undergo this time around. Yes, still it will undergo that kind of, mitosis, and this mitosis will give us something we call primary, oocyte, primary oocyte. So that's the product. This time around, we don't have type A dark, type E dark. No. We just have oogonia. So that upon mitosis, we are going to give rise to what we call primary oocyte. Primary oocyte, the first cells that will arise from what we call the mitotic division of oogonia. So we produce that primary oocyte. Now remember that the oogonia, they are diploid cells. For that reason, the product of the mitotic division, of the oogonia giving rise to the primary oocyte will also give us diploid cells. For that reason, primary oocytes are also diploid. Yes, that is what we are going to see. Now, the important thing is that this primary oocyte, primary, for that reason, it will begin its first meiotic division. Now remember, everything I'm talking about till now is taking place in intrauterine life period. So that around what we call the, once we are having this kind of primary oocyte, it will begin the first meiotic division. So that, yes, that first meiotic division, we want to produce secondary oocyte. But my friends, something happens. There's going to be an arrest, So instead of completing the journey from primary oocyte becoming secondary oocyte, no, it is arrested. Okay, so it's like want to travel from Kumasi, yes, to, let's say, Cape Coast. But what happens is that, yes, as you began, immediately as you began, you were arrested, let's say at what do you call Bekwai. Okay, so there has been an arrest. Okay, that is one useful thing I want you to know. In the case of spermatogenesis, there was no arrest anywhere. It began and it went on smoothly, continuously. But these ones, we have some checkpoints to arrest them to ensure that perhaps everything is going well. You are not carrying anything where is not good with you. So meiosis is never completed. It is arrested in intrauterine life period. And it doesn't continue. Okay, it doesn't continue. And even after birth, it still doesn't continue. Why? Because in the childhood period till you get to puberty, the female ovaries are inactive. Yes, I want to say that. The female ovaries are not functional enough. They are not, well developed, okay, to, deal with all that kind of molecular changes, all the stress, okay, that, is associated with, of course, the process of, oogenesis. So it means that the female ovary, females, you have two ovaries, they are both inactive, okay, around, yes, after birth till, you reach your, the pubertal age. Yes, that's what is going to happen. My friends, one useful thing I want to tell you is that these oocytes were arrested. The interesting thing is that, yes, although we're having about 7 million, but after birth, the maximum number of primary oocytes that will persist, okay, will just be about, maximum will be 2 million. Okay, so just about 1 to 2 million, yes, maximum. That's what is going to happen. Why? Because I will tell you something next week, that there will be something we call folliculogenesis. So that these primary oocytes, they have to go into what we call these kind of follicles, primordial follicles. Okay, we will see that, which of course most of them will die through an unexplained process we call atresia. So at the end of the day, we are having about maximum of 2 million, primary oocytes in here. Now, what else happens? Now, every month, these primary oocytes, which will be in some primordial follicles that we talk about, females, okay, which you'll be having, at birth, you'll be having about 1 million to 2 million. But what happens is that around the time of puberty, you are left with just about, 400,000. Okay, so that value that you are having, it is that one that every month some of them will be recruited to go through a process of folliculogenesis, so that yes, all these changes that eventually the oocyte is going to go through, the development changes is going to take place within a microenvironment within these kind of follicles we are talking about, surrounded by some cells, we call them follicles, and we see that next week. But for now, we are looking at how these gametes they are produced. Yes. So now we're having this primary oocytes. Okay, now after birth, the ovaries are inactive. Then what happens is that before puberty, okay, so just around puberty, so from puberty till the time of menopause, this process will happen, okay, every month. Unlike in males, that is happening every single day, the process is taking place. That for the female, yes, is going to take place every month. Of course, every month one of the ovaries will be active in doing that. Okay, they work in that kind of alternative, manner, or that alternate manner. That's what is going to take place. Yes. Now, so we have our primary oocyte, okay, which was arrested, which was undergoing meiosis 1. It got arrested. Now, at puberty, okay, every month, some number of these, primordial, follicular cells, follicles, which are bearing these primary oocytes, will be recruited to undergo some kind of process under the influence of some hormone we call follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. But my friends, just around, okay, the time where we find, about 20 of them are selected, but usually one of them will reach the mature stage, which is the Graafian follicle, and just about 36 hours prior to that ovulation, the expulsion of that oocyte, what is going to happen is that there's going to be something we call LH surge, luteinizing hormone surge. And that luteinizing hormone surge will ensure that, of course, that meiosis 1 becomes completed. So you see, that meiosis, which began in intrauterine life around the 5th month of intrauterine life, got arrested. It took a very long time. There was a very large, period of dormancy, of inactivity, but it only resumed only and only after puberty, where there is LH surge. Yes. And when that happens, what is going to happen is that meiosis is an equational division. Yeah, meiosis 1 is a reductional division. For this reason, this primary oocyte, which was diploid, will give rise to something we call secondary oocyte. And this time around, it is haploid, together with the first polar body, something you may also call it the primary polar body. But I have to be quick and tell you something. Okay, at what point did this meiosis 1 got arrested? My friends, the answer is prophase of meiosis 1. And precisely what stage of the prophase are we talking about? Your answer that you have to give is diplotin. Diplotin stage is that stage where meiosis 1 is arrested in intrauterine life period. Okay, so get to understand these things. Now we have our first polar body, and we also have our secondary oocyte. Now remember, the first polar body that we produce, now this kind of meiosis is a reductional division, and interestingly, it didn't produce equal cells. It produced unequal cells, and unequal in the sense that the polar body, the first polar body that we produce, will be very small, very little cytoplasm, content, compared to, of course, the secondary oocyte. So it becomes useless. It may die, or sometimes it may even undergo, it may undergo, mitotic division, or because it's haploid, yes, it may undergo second meiotic division in that case. And then because second meiotic division is, of course, just like mitosis, it's an equational division, it may give rise to other, haploid, polar bodies from it. Otherwise, it may degenerate and die. But we are interested in the secondary oocyte. Now, the secondary oocyte also begins meiosis. So that would be the meiosis 2. So that's meiosis 2. Yes, it begins and then also gets arrested again. So it's like, now we've moved away from Bekwai. Okay, we are moving to Cape Coast. Okay, we got arrested at Bekwai. Yes, everything has been checked. There was LH surge at puberty. We stayed there for a very long time. Now we've moved. This time around, we get arrested again. And this time around, it's not, prophase. This time, because we've been able to deal with the prophases, yes, we got arrested this time around at metaphase. And I want to liken the metaphase with, for instance, let's say Asinfosu. So we got arrested at Asinfosu. Yes, metaphase. For this reason, what is going to happen is that we have to complete it. So we get arrested over there. My friends, most of the secondary oocytes, they are not able to complete their second meiotic division. Yes, they are not able to complete it. Now, it therefore tells you another distinction. For the male, yes, we are able to go through the spermatogenesis, continuously without any arrest. We're able to do it at almost every time. But in the case of the female, there are checkpoints. And especially at metaphase 2, where there's another arrest, in most of the female, yes, the oogenesis is never completed. Why? Because the only time this metaphase 2 will come to completion is when a viable spermatozoon fertilizes this secondary oocyte. Yes. Because when it fertilizes it, it becomes that kind of, stimulus for the completion of meiosis 2. So that when the completion of meiosis 2 happens, we form what we call the ovum. And then, of course, the next polar body, in this case, let me call it the secondary polar body, or the second polar body will come. So in most cases, you may see these polar bodies associated with, of course, the fertilized, ovum. That's what we see. Okay, so I mean, essentially, these are the steps that I want you to be aware of. Okay, so it tells you that in the case of meiosis, it begins all the way in intrauterine life period, number one. Then it continues in the ovary, number two. Then it finally terminates in the uterine tube, especially in the ampulla region, or the ampuloisthmic junction, ampulla of the uterine tube. That is where, okay, it's going to finish this whole oogenesis process. Okay, now unlike in the case of what we call the males, which I told you that if you take one oogonium, because the several mitoid divisions can give rise to a maximum of 512 spermatozoa. For that of females, just one oogonia is giving us, one functional, secondary oocyte in the KO ovum, with some polar bodies which are not useful as far as fertilization is concerned. But in the case of the male, we produce all those cells. For instance, if you take the primary oocyte, it's giving us 4 cells in the case of the female, but 3 of them are polar bodies, and 1 of them will become, of course, the secondary oocyte, the ovum, which you eventually will have to be fertilized, okay, by the mature sperm. It tells me that if I take the male, if I take what we call the primary oocyte, that one is rather going to give me about 4 functional spermatozoon. These are some distinctions that I want you to keep in mind. All right, I'm very grateful for your time this evening. Next week we'll look at the folliculogenesis, which of course these oocytes have to get in there. We see the process, all the hormones which are playing important roles in there. We see them. I'm very grateful for your time this evening. Have a good night, all of you, and may the good Lord richly bless you. Amen.